When you're raising children, there's always somebody who needs something. And when you got 4 of them, it is constant. It's, don't forget to send $10 to school with Malcolm for his field trip. Jackson's meds are ready at the pharmacy. Connor's tuition is due. And brace yourself. William might need braces. And then there's another member of our family, a stately old gal still standing at 110 years old, our house. And she always needs about a dozen things, ranging from cosmetic touch-ups to deep reconstructive surgery. Last November, she caught a cold, by which I mean the heat went out, and she needed a furnace transplant. None of these is my house. I thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, I should just go outside and take a picture of my house. And I thought, I didn't feel like going outside. It was too cold. And I thought, let's just get some houses from my neighborhood. That's okay. I say she's our house, but that doesn't sound quite right, because I don't really feel like it belongs to us. We've lived there more than a decade, which is longer than I've ever lived in the same place. But to her, a decade is the blink of an eye. And in terms of ownership, I sort of feel like we adopted each other. She adopted this young family, and we adopted this, now I don't want to say elderly or superannuated. Let's say distinguished. We adopted this distinguished dame in the neighborhood. She's a little rickety, a little cranky and idiosyncratic. She's got some crow's feet in her plaster and the occasional leaking in the basement, but she's got good bones. Better a centenarian with strong timber, I think, than a new model with a heart of particle board. There are 5 houses in our neighborhood, and they repeat in different colors and combinations. There must be 100 copies of each one. That you can kind of see in this random grouping of houses from my neighborhood. We once went to drop off Connor at a friend's house. I walked in, and it's like everything seemed wrong. Everything was out of place. And then I realized everything was fine. It's just that it was the exact same layout as my house, with different wall paint and furniture. Like my house had an identical twin separated at birth. Or like that dream in which you had never been born, and familiar things took unfamiliar shapes in the hands of other people. It was really nice to get home after that, to see the bookshelves and the giant framed posters by my favorite artist, Jim Lee. No offense, but everybody else's wall art looks like the pictures they hang in dentist office bathrooms compared to Jim Lee. The houses in our neighborhood were all built at the same time, around 1910. They're like the Golden Girls. They stay close together. I would like to think of our house as the Dorothy on the block, whom the neighboring houses would lean on if they started to sag. But I think everybody feels like their house is the Dorothy of the group. And my neighbors probably think of my house as Rose, full of wandering stories and strange customs. My office is a library, or maybe I should say a museum of physical media. To my left are wooden record shelves containing the 600 vinyl albums that I absolutely must have within easy reach at all times. The closet behind me has built-in shelves containing the 400 additional records that I don't mind crossing the room to play once every couple of years. Since graduating from high school, I have relocated this record collection approximately 1,000 times. Or maybe 12, but it feels like 1,000. It's my anchor. Home is where my records are. My kids sometimes look at one and they say, "Oh, what's this?" And I say, "No, don't get started." Not because both of my parents have, at times, had to help me move this collection, but because I don't think that human beings should be anchored in this way. Bookshelves behind me and to my right in my office contain the 800 or so books that I might have to grab at a moment's notice, when some idea or question comes to mind. Then there are other walls of books in my house. I sometimes joke that if one more book came into the house, it would sink into the earth. But I never pass by a little free library on someone's lawn without a look inside, and usually come home with some heretofore unknown, but instantly indispensable old paperback. Last year, the Canisius Library downsized its holdings of physical books. They had thousands and thousands of volumes lined up in the basement to be discarded. Hundreds of these displaced refugees resettled in my house. Hundreds is not an exaggeration. I took Elizabeth there on a date, and we filled the trunk of our van. One of the many refugees from this library was a book by Erica Jung entitled, "What Do Women Want?" And I've been reading these essays. In one, she wrote, "As a child, not knowing there is an alternative, you never really appreciate home. As a young adult, home is what you want to leave as soon as possible. Only in midlife does home beckon seductively again, inviting you to pleasures that running away can never supply. Home is where your books are," she wrote. "Home is where you know all the quirks of the plumbing, but they comfort rather than irritate you." Les, would you change it, please? Lakota medicine man Black Elk said that one of his earliest memories in the 1860s was that a shaman in his teepee village had a nightmarish vision. The natives of the plains would get caught up in the white man's spider web and would be forced to live in square gray houses. The visionary was so dispirited by this dream that he died shortly after it. For the free-range Lakota, the house that made the most sense was a cone-shaped tent. They needed to be able to pack up their homes and move at any time because the bison herds were always on the go, and the bison was like their Walmart on hooves. It had food to eat and leather for tents and clothing and bones for tools. So in this lifeway that was so entwined with this other species, it really made sense to live inside of the bison. That's what it meant to live in bison skin, was that the bison was your home. I think that's really beautiful, but I can't imagine living in a cone. I've lived in a lot of houses, apartments, and dorm rooms in 15 towns in 7 states, plus one horrible day in Pennsylvania. And come to think of it, every building I've ever inhabited has been made up of squares and rectangles and triangles. And that makes sense to me because my desk and my bookshelves are all squares and triangles too. The first house I ever lived in was an old fortress, one of the oldest buildings in the Garden State. George Washington once spent the night there. This old house in New Jersey was haunted. Probably not by George Washington, just by some nameless nobodies who slowly walked up and down the stairs all night long. There was a fence of black-painted iron bars around the house and yard, and it was under the New Jersey Turnpike, which drizzled litter and cigarette butts, because this was the last chance to leave your trash in New Jersey before driving into New York, so people would just fling it out their car windows. But that was my introduction to the concept of a house. It's called the Plume House. I learned this week it actually has a Wikipedia page. It's a historical landmark from 1710. That house was already ancient. It was already 150 years old when that Lakota medicine man had the vision of square houses and died of despair in 1860. Maybe that was the house that he saw in his dream. This old fortress surrounded by iron bars. Bars to fence people in? No, even more frightening than that. Bars to protect the tenants from the nightmarish world of poverty, robbery, violent crime, and strangers. I can understand how a dream like that could kill someone. The teepee was a home, but not a place to live. It was a place to sleep and to get out of the rain. But the Lakota lifeway was mainly lived outdoors, in public, in a community where everyone knows everyone, and where nobody could really steal your favorite tomahawk while you were away because it was handcrafted, no two were alike, and everyone in the village would recognize it in someone else's hands. Black Elk said, "Our teepees are round like the nests of birds, and these are always set in a circle, the nation's hoop, a nest of many nests, where the Great Spirit meant for us to hatch our children." Compared to that, my square house seems kind of alien. A fortress of wood, plaster, and glass meant to contain my children and to protect them from a city of strangers. Square houses arranged in a coldly calculated grid so that they could be numbered instead of named. But nonetheless, my house is what feels like home to me. Not just a place to sleep, but a place to live. It is the square nest where we raise our children, one of whom was born in the living room. And when I think about what makes this land sacred to me, part of that is the houses that I've lived in, which are not natural features like mountains and rivers, but they are part of my sense of what America is, the spiritual landscape. The house where my mother's parents lived. While we moved to Newark, Cincinnati, Allegheny, they lived in the same old house in Queens, pretty much since getting off the boat from Hungary in 1956. And that house, to me, felt eternal, as much a part of the American landscape as the Grand Canyon and the Mississippi. And I fantasize that the house that we live in now could be that for my grandchildren someday. Solid as Mount Rushmore, steady as the Niagara River. I am a homebody. Sometimes I realize I haven't, while I was doing notes for this sermon, I realized I had not been outside of my house in 22 hours. So I went for a little walk. I spend the majority of my waking hours indoors. If you added in sleep time, it would be 2/3 or 3/4 of the average day that I spend inside. As a matter of fact, even that doesn't sound quite right. Most of my outdoor time is spent hurrying from one enclosed location to another. I feel most like myself when I'm in my house. But the coronavirus reminded me that home is also a hive. And if bees don't circulate, it can get pretty dry and dreary in there. My office is where I process stuff that I've experienced out in the world, and my creative batteries recharge by spending time in different contexts with different people, different perspectives and temperaments, trying to make various people laugh or think about something. So it's important to get out there. On weekends, the only thing that'll get me outside is that I know that Elizabeth finds me more handsome when I'm rounding up the kids to go to a park. It's like it makes me look like some kind of cowboy, like rustling all these children out the door. It makes me look like an outdoorsman, even though really I'm just going there so I can sit at a picnic table and read. So then we go to the playground. Sometimes they play. Sometimes they protest by refusing to play. I tell them doing nothing outside is still healthier than watching TV inside. And bring a book next time. Winter is coming, and with it, the perfect excuse to stop feeling guilty about wanting to stay indoors all the time. But if you're a homebody like me, remember, it is our interactions and our work and our resilience in the hectic, honking, helter-skelter outside world that give meaning to the quiet moments at home. Thank you.